Hi there, it's Wanda, and I thought today I would show you how to make a vest from a pattern. I know that if you're a new sewer, it may be a little intimidating to try to figure out how to use a pattern. And so I'm going to try to show you how to do that and how I lay it out and cut it out, and maybe that'll help a bit. So this is a vest that I have made before, and it is easy. Even though I'm a more advanced sewer, I've been sewing for years, sometimes it's good just to make something that's easy. And so you see this pattern says it's easy, and it only has a few pattern pieces to make this vest. Now, in selecting material to make a pattern, to make from the pattern, your pattern on the back will give you suggestions about what type of material would be best for you to use. And right down on this particular one, it's right there, it says suggested fabrics. But you know, you might also just take an example from some clothes that you already own. So if you have one of these long vests, you may feel of it and see what kind of material it is already that you purchased, and then try to find some at the fabric store, or ask someone at the fabric store to help you, and they'll be glad to. In this case, I've made 2 of these already, and so I'm pretty familiar with the pattern, so I thought that would make it a little easier to show it to you. Sorry, Grandpa's mowing, and you may be able to hear the mower in the background, but it's still summertime here. The next thing that you need to know is how much fabric you're going to buy. So you're going to sort of need to know which size you are. Now, don't freak out with the sizes on patterns, because they're a lot larger than what is typical for clothes that you buy ready-made in the store. So, but there is an example. Say on this one, the extra small is a 6 to 8. The small is a 10 to 12. The medium is a 14 to a 16. Now, in ready-made clothes, I wear a size 10. And since I've already made this vest before, I know that I need a medium. And I just sort of guessed at it because I knew that patterns the sizing runs larger. So I'm cutting this out based on a medium size. So it says, I just run down, I look on the front, and I'm going to be making the blue one here, which is the A pattern. And so I look on the back and see, okay, so for medium, the A, how much fabric do I need? And it shows you. Now, over at the side, it'll say 45 inch, 60 inch. That is the width of the material. But now when you buy it at the store, it's going to be doubled and then wrapped around the bolts. And so it'll look like a 45 will look like, 22 inches, 23 inches on the bolt. But that's a 45. And it will tell you on the end of the bolt how wide the fabric is. And so then you can use that as an example. Now I'm also going to show you where I've laid this out, how you can buy less fabric. And that's more of a trial and error, because until you know, you don't know. And so sometimes the amount of fabric that they give you here is a lot more than you might actually need, depending on how you lay it out. So there's that. So on the inside of the envelope, the pattern envelope, will be all the pattern pieces, and they're made out of tissue, and they're all folded up nice and neat. You will never ever be able to get this back in that envelope as flat as it once was, but they suggest, on the pattern, they suggest that you iron all of your pattern pieces. Who's got time for that? And also, they'll tell you, oh, trim them all out and everything before you get started. Well, you know, I never do that. So, but I do try, once I finish a project, I do try to fold it back up and stuff it back in the envelope so that I know all the pattern pieces are there the next time I get ready to make that particular piece. Because, as you see, I've already made 2 off this and I'm getting ready to make the 3rd. And so you're maximizing the money that you spend on the pattern if you make it, you know, multiple times. Also, patterns will come printed in multiple sizes. So the pattern, and let's show you one here. This is the sleeve pattern because the yellow one that I made had sleeves. Of course, I've already used this, so I cut it out to medium, but you can see there that it still has the extra small and the small lines on it. So I could have made it whatever size, so it would have had large and extra large, which I've already cut off. But if you have multiple people that's going to be using the pattern, they're different sizes, it is possible to cut it out just going kind of underneath the pattern instead of actually cutting the paper if someone wants to use it for a different size. I mean, it's possible. So there's that. Also, your pattern pieces will have an arrow on them. So right here is an arrow running down the tissue paper, and this is showing you the direction of the grain of the fabric. Now, unless you are sewing corduroy or velvet or something that has a nap, and so a nap means when you rub your hand across it, it leaves that pattern, and then you run it back the other way and the fibers stand up the other direction. So that's the nap. And so as a beginning sewer, if you're making something, well, you shouldn't start out with something with a nap. So like corduroy or velvet, don't do that anyway. But this arrow is to help you to keep it straight. So this is really important to keep the arrow straight on your fabric for several reasons. This particular material that I'm getting ready to use here has a pattern on it, and it has a line that runs across it and some flowers and other kind of diagonal things. So if I didn't follow the pattern and the line and lay it out straight with the grain of the material, then once I started wearing the vest, someone's going to notice that it's not cut out correctly, and it's the pattern of the fabric is off, is sideways or whatever. And so you do need to pay attention to that. And so what I normally do is, if you're working with something that has a line in it or has a polka dot or a check or something that is a straight line, that works really well, and you can lay the arrow straight along that line, and that way you know that you're going straight. If that's not possible, then you can measure from the edge of your fabric over to the arrow. So you can take the side, get a ruler or something, and you can actually measure from the edge of your fabric over to the arrow, all along the arrow, to make sure that you have the pattern lined up straight. And that's going to help you a lot. We'll get that out of the way because it keeps getting caught on the pins. So let me show you a few things. There is an instruction sheet that comes along with the pattern, and it has a lot of information for you, and so you want to read through it. Some of it I follow and some of it I don't. And I was just looking on this one, and it was saying to fold your fabric inside out and lay your pattern on the wrong side of the fabric. Well, I've never done that. I understand why, because there are certain indicators on the pattern that you may want to mark on the fabric. Say, for instance, this sleeve pattern has a little dot here at the top that shows you where the top of the sleeve is. So that would show you there's no seam there, but that will show you where the sleeve should be meeting the seam that's at the top of the shoulder. And so that would be something that you would mark on the pattern, actually on the fabric as you're going along. You can put a pin there. You can do it before you take the tissue off of the material. You can mark it on the inside of the fabric. Or you can do it like they say. You can do it, if you fold your fabric inside out, you could do it, as you're going along. And then when you cut it and take the pattern piece off, then your marks are already there on the inside. And so that would be just fine. Also, on the pieces, you'll notice that there is a number. And so this is the sleeve, and it is number 3. And so all of the pattern pieces are numbered. So, because sometimes you can't really figure out what they are, or some patterns will have 2 different kinds of sleeves. I mean, maybe it'll have a longer sleeve, and then maybe it'll have a shorter cap sleeve. And so they would be different numbers, but they would both say sleeve. This one says sleeve B, which means it's the B view on the front of the pattern, which is this floral one in the illustration, and you see it has a sleeve. And so all the pattern pieces are marked like that. Also, the pattern pieces will tell you how many to cut. And so this is an easy pattern, and so you're cutting 2 of everything. So it'll say on the pattern piece, cut 2. And so what you're doing is you're going to lay your material, your folded material. It'll be folded down the center lengthwise, just as it came off the bolt, usually, just as it came off the bolt. And so the selvage edge is on one side, and then the fold is on the other side. Now the selvage edge is the edge where the printing runs out, or the color runs out, and usually there will be writing along that edge, and it will tell you the brand of the fabric, maybe even the name of the fabric, design, things like that. That's the selvage edge. So you'll know because it's just the edge of the fabric, but it's not finished out. Sometimes it'll be finished out, but it'll be a finished edge, and it's the edge of the fabric, as opposed to the cut edge of the fabric where it was cut at the store. And so you'll know that that's what those differences are. So I have it laid out. The fold side is here. The selvage edge is over there. And so now I've got my pattern pieces laid out. Now, when you look at the instruction sheet, it will show you what the different versions are supposed to look like. And it will also show you all the pattern pieces and the numbers, the corresponding numbers, and what they are. So you'll see, so for instance, right here is that sleeve piece, and it says sleeve 3. And so it's pretty self-explanatory that way. Okay, down the bottom here, it has cutting layouts. And this is where I'm going to show you some tricks to maybe save a little fabric. But you'll notice, so I'm doing version A, and my fabric is approximately 45. Now, occasionally, you'll get fabric that's like a weird 54, and so that doesn't quite work. And so you'll know if it's a 54, you probably can get by with a little less. And so I don't really know how wide mine is. It may be a 54. I don't know. But if you look at the cutting example layout for the 45 fabric, they have the 2 pattern pieces needed, which is the front piece of the vest, so you're cutting 2, and then the back piece of the vest, which you're cutting 2, and then it has a seam down the back, seam on the shoulders, seam under the sleeves. So there's only 4 actual pieces of material, 2 pattern pieces cut to 2 pieces each. So the way they have it shown is they're laying pretty much end to end. Get it close enough you can see it. They've got them end to end, and you'll see there's a lot of wasted material there, and that kind of bothers me to waste that much material. And so I have it laid out a little differently, and I'll show you that in a second. Also, on your pattern, it will tell you, give you instructions on how to use the multiple sized pattern, which we kind of talked about a little bit. It says study your pattern markings. And so we've already talked about the one that was at the top of the sleeve, the little circle that's indicating where the seam, where the sleeve should meet the seam. But there are also other markings. For instance, these little triangles, I call them darts. I don't know. A dart is actually something else, but they call them notches. So, but you'll see there's notches. And say, for instance, on this sleeve pattern, this is a good illustration. You see right here, there is a single notch pattern mark there. On the other side of the sleeve, it's a double notch. And so that way you know, and you can match that up, because when we get to the pattern pieces, the pattern piece for the sleeve, you probably can't see it, but on the pattern right here, there's a double notch. And so when you get ready to sew that, you're going to lay the double notched side of that pattern, that piece of material, at that place. And so it matches together, and then you sew it together and you've done it correctly. And so those notches are important because it helps you get everything lined up when you're getting ready to sew. What else is on here that you need to know? It also tells you the average hem that they're going to put in it. Now, you know, once you can do it the way they say it the first way, if you're going to make something multiple times, but you know, this says 1.25 inch hem. I didn't put that big of a hem in it, but you know, you can modify it however you want, but maybe the first time you do it the way they say it. So let's see what else is on here that they're talking about. The cutting layouts, which we talked about. And on the cutting layouts, when they show them, they will show it grayed out versus just the regular white. And that means you flip the pattern over. And of course, if you're cutting two, then it doesn't matter that one is backwards, because that way you can get more on your fabric. You can put them closer. You can fit them in easier sometimes if you flip one of them over. And so that's what they're showing you there on the layout, where one is grayed out. Now, let's see, what else does it say? It does talk about single. If you're only cutting one out, you may be cutting just a single layer out. And then there's sewing instructions, and we're not going to talk about that because we're just talking about cutting the fabric today. So for now, I think that's all we needed from the instruction sheet, and I always like to fold it back so at some point I can get it back in that little teeny envelope. So, okay. So I know you can't see this real well, but hopefully you'll get the idea. I'm here by myself because Grandpa's outside mowing. So it's hard for me to hold the camera and cut at the same time. So I'm going to show you this way, and hopefully you can figure out what I'm doing. But I've laid the pattern pieces out. This particular piece, which is just out of your vision there, is right side up. And it is laid close to the selvage side. And so I've already pinned it down, and as I've already told you, I've got it on the medium size. I've already used this pattern, so it's already cut to the medium size, and so I've already got that one laid down. Now this one is flipped over, so it's the reverse side of the pattern piece. It doesn't matter because we're cutting two pieces, so it doesn't matter. But I did that because I bought less fabric. I didn't have the pattern with me when I was at the fabric store, and so I was just kind of going from memory. It didn't quite get enough. I really would have liked to put a sleeve in this one. I think it would have been really nice. And this is a fall color material, and I want to wear it for fall. So it would be nice to have had a sleeve in it, but I didn't buy enough material, so my bad. So when it came to laying it out, I had to figure out how to get it all on the material that I had, and so I had to flip this one over so that I could pull it up a little closer. So on this piece, I have the narrow end up here and the wider hem down on this end, and on this one it's just the reverse. So I have the narrow shoulder end on this end and the wide hem end down this way. Now, something else that I want to show you is I'm short. Grandma is a little woman. So I've made this before, as I've said multiple times. So I know that this pattern is way too long for me. It would be on the floor on me. So I already know where I need to cut this off. And so what I did is I took one of the ones that I had already made, and I laid it down, and I marked my pattern. And so I just marked my pattern and made a little cut line here so I know where to cut the fabric and make it the size that will fit me. So that's going to save me a bit of material too, and so I may end up making maybe a little scarf or something out of it because it is kind of a thin material. So I've got that all pinned down, and it's ready to cut out. So I'll show you that. Now, you have to have good scissors if you're going to sew. And scissors were a big deal in my home growing up because my mother did sew. We were not allowed to touch her sewing scissors. Not at all. Because if you start cutting paper with these scissors, they'll get dull and they will not cut fabric. So you need good scissors, when you're going to cut fabric. And so that's real important that you have good sharp scissors, and you can hear them, how tight they are. Hey, Grandpa.
Hey.
So now we're going to cut out. So what I'm going to do is just follow. Now, if you're cutting for the first time and you haven't trimmed the pattern, then you may be actually cutting the fabric or cutting the tissue for the pattern. But I'm not. I've already made this pattern. And so I'm going to actually, well, actually this back piece, I don't know how I cut it out before, but I didn't cut the pattern. So here we go. So I'm just cutting along the solid black line, which is the cutting line. And you need to pin it down every 6 inches or so because you don't want the material shifting around. And so you cut that out just along the black line. Now, if there is a place that has those little notches that we talked about earlier, then the pattern instructions will tell you to mark those. What I do is I cut them because it will be in the seam. And so what my mother taught me to do, and so I'll show you how to do, is instead of cutting them in to the seam, I'm going to notch them out. So instead of cutting them in to the fabric, I'm going to cut them outside of the cutting line. And so again, you probably can't see this, but maybe I can hold it up and so get it cut. And so all of this you're just going to throw away. Let me cut this a little further and then maybe I can hold it up and show you. Yeah, so don't let your kids hide your material cutting scissors. Don't let your kids use them, and don't you use them for anything other than fabric. And get good scissors. You're going to have to invest a little bit of money in good scissors. Okay, so there I've cut that out. Now you may be able to see there where there was actually 3 notches there. And so instead of cutting that into the fabric, I cut it out instead of in. And so maybe you can see that. Hopefully you can see that. So that's what you're going to do. You're just going to either follow the solid black line, or you're going to follow whichever dotted line is appropriate for your size. And you'll have to be really careful and make sure you're following the correct size all the way around. But you're going to just keep cutting all the way around until you've got it cut completely out. So here's 2 notches. This is what would be for the sleeve. This particular one is not going to have sleeves. But we're just going to keep that cutting. And cut down this way. There's another notch. Thin material is really hard to cut too because it wants to wiggle around on you a lot. So you see I've got my hand on it to kind of keep it from moving around a lot. And I know also I've used pins to pin this down, but I know you can also use weights so that you don't have to fool with the pins. So I'm looking to see where my hemline is, which is different from their hemline. Didn't quite get this finished here. Okay, throw this away. And so there you go. So this is actually the back piece. Isn't that going to be pretty? So there you go. That is how to select a pattern, find your size, find how much material you need, what kind of material you need, what size you need, and then how to lay it out and how to cut it out. So I hope that helps you, and try it. It's easier than you think. Bye for now.